India imported $19 billion worth of edible oils last year. That's right. And why are we importing so much of edible oil? Why can't we make our own edible oil? Because this is creating a lot of pressure on our import bill, on the dollar reserves that we have. Hi folks, this is team Read On. Today I have with me Garima Upadhyay, and I'm the co-founder at Read On, and today we'll be discussing this very interesting topic which has come to the light because of some protests and all that are happening around GM mustard, that is a genetically modified mustard seeds. And let's try and unravel what's the story behind it and how it is related to edible oil, and which goes to how the consumption behavior is of citizens in our country. So let's dive deeper into this. I'm super excited to record this with you, Garima.
Same here, Shantanu.
Superb. So, can genetically modified mustard help us reduce our import bill? So, first of all, let's understand what is India's edible oil consumption overall. So, we were doing some deep dive and we figured out that India consumes, on an average per person, 19 to 20 kgs of oil per annum. That's a very high consumption of oil. And this is only going upwards. I think we were doing 14 and a half kgs somewhere around 2014, 2015. But after that, the consumption has just gone up rapidly. And we just did a back of the envelope calculation to figure out, okay, what is the total kind of uh, consumption in tonnage, right? And we consume 2.6 crore tons of oil every year, and out of that 70% is imported, which is approximately 1.83 crore ton, um, which is a huge burden for us. This is just to paint a picture in terms of how big the space is and how big probably the problem also is for us. Now let's look at, there are different types of edible oil also, right? Some folks prefer vegetable oil, some folks, probably you guys order rice bran oil, some folks order groundnut oil, then there is palm oil, soy oil, and then mustard oil, right? So I think Garima has written quite some bit on palm oil also, and why that is not that great, etc. For us, that's not that healthy. And mustard oil is something uh, that not a lot of people consume because of the taste of mustard oil, right? But the entire focus of this piece today is on mustard oil and how we can probably increase the yield or output of mustard oil, and that's, we'll also discuss about the problem that exists. So let's move on to the next slide, where we'll see this 14% uh, number, how we can take a bit higher also. Now, why is mustard oil not so popular? Why only 14% of the folks are preferring mustard oil? Number one, it is very costly to grow mustard oil because it takes a lot of land, it requires specialized equipment, and it is just harder for on the farmer. And number two, the yield is also lower. So it's not like you can spend more on seeds and then get a higher yield. The yield is also lower for the farmers. And you can't grow other crops along with mustard, right? So that becomes a real challenge. And Garima, I think you were telling me a number of how palm oil is so much cheaper. What was that number? I'm forgetting.
Yeah, so on an average, palm oil gives a like 10 times higher yield than most other oil seeds, right? That's why palm oil is much cheaper, and that's why
Right,
even if we have to import palm oil, our consumption of palm oil is still much higher. If you go back to the
right.
last, like 38%, that's our consumption because most
So,
hotels, restaurants, snack chains, they prefer palm oil because obviously cheaper for them.
right, but it is not that healthy, I think, right?
No,
Even
palm oil, in fact, most refined oils are not healthy for you. They're not good for you. Even the ones that claim, they're good for your heart and all, they're not really that great for your heart. Mustard oil is much more beneficial for you. And, like you're talking about reasons why mustard oil isn't that popular, there's also going back, I think, a couple of years back, there was a dropsy epidemic, and mustard oil was wrongly linked to that epidemic, and because of which a lot of people started mixing refined oils with mustard oil to make it
hmm,
safer for consumption. But now we finally figured out that mustard oil is actually good for you and refined oils are not good for you. And that blending has finally been banned last year. So because of
hmm,
that blending, also mustard oil consumption was very low. So
hmm.
farmers' prices were getting impacted. So a lot of farmers dropped producing mustard oil at all. So our consumption of refined oil, which we import, again increased because of that. So
Right.
if mustard yield is increased, maybe more farmers could, start planting it again.
Right. And I think probably that's what genetically modified mustard is also solving for, right? They're
Yeah.
claiming that the yields will get boosted by 28 to 30%, which is a really, really high increase in the yield or in the output for the farmers. And they can probably reduce the crop under cultivation under mustard, grow some other crops, and make their money out of that, etc. And that can overall increase the farmers' income also. With more production, probably the prices will also start coming down, and it can then probably be a good substitute for the other forms of oil that we have, right?
Hmm.
Perfect. So, but a lot of farmer associations, and that's where this actually, caught my attention also. That there were a lot of folks who were not really supporting this move. So even if you look at this protest picture, right? No poison
Yes.
in our food, reject GM, mustard clearance, or face people's resistance, etc. Save our sarson. We want real solutions, not GM mustard, etc. Right? So I guess these are folks who are actually revolting against this, do not want this, and we were curious as to why this was happening, right? And guys, we found that the major contentions of people is that probably it is very dangerous for consumption, the genetically modified mustard. It may degrade the quality of the output that comes out, though it will result in a higher yield. Probably the quality will not be that great. And when we say quality, we mean that, say today with 10 units of mustard, you can create 1 unit of mustard oil, right? Probably that will reduce drastically. Maybe you'll need 20 mustard units to create one mustard oil unit, right? So I'm not sure about the exact impact, but yeah, there is this question of degradation of quality. It could also impact bees, other pollinators, and it could have other environmental impact as well, and it could affect the folks that manufacture honeybee or extract honeybee, so to say, and their livelihoods may get impacted. It is also herbicide resistant, and it could lead to soil damage. Garima, if you can throw some light on this specific point on how this can lead to soil damage as well.
Yeah. So these plants, they're not really impacted by herbicides. Herbicides are mainly meant to kill weeds that grow along with these plants, right? They're not good for farmers. They leach all the nutrients from the plants, so herbicides need to be killed. Sorry, weeds need to be killed by herbicides. Now these plants, they're not damaged by herbicides. To kill weeds that grow with them, farmers can spray as much herbicide as they want, and these plants will not be impacted. But you know uh, what do you call it, spraying so much herbicide could, one, lead to weeds becoming resistant and weeds growing, more weeds growing, which is going to impact output later on. Plus, this could impact our health because the herbicide residue remains on the plant. The plant may be resistant, but we are not resistant to it, right? So it may lead to allergies in farmers, people who are processing this oil, consumers, all of them, right? Plus, this
Right.
herbicide leaches into the soil and also the groundwater. So then the groundwater could be damaged, the soil quality could be damaged. So ultimately, not a good idea.
Right. So basically, you're saying that this could trigger a behavior in farmers which would make them put more herbicides in the soil instead of less, because this is herbicide resistant. And I think there was an interesting fact also that you were mentioning, and we can probably touch upon that in the later slides. Um, but that was also an interesting fact on how this can lead to more sales for a particular brand. Let's look
Yeah.
at that in the next slides. Um, the whole contention, I think, around this, um, you know getting into this GM mustard thing is that this will make us atmanirbhar. So guys, we really asked whether this will make us atmanirbhar or not, and we realized that the while this can increase the crop yield and while all of these positive effects can happen, it might just make us dependent on this particular variety of genetically modified mustard. And maybe we'll be completely dependent on this German company called Bayer, which is supplying this genetically modified mustard. So probably it'll not make us atmanirbhar completely. And interestingly, as Garima was telling us, um, this company also sells herbicides,
Yeah,
right?
so making a herbicide resistant plant really makes sense for them. Farmers can, it's just
Right.
selling everything, selling seeds, The seeds will sell its herbicides, so sales for the
Correct.
company, good sales for the company.
Exactly. But then that might just, that whole loop of capitalism or that lure of higher yield might just make them spend more on those herbicides, and probably, end up damaging the soil and the environment. So that brings us to the question that what do we need to do to make India adopt mustard oil, right? There is obviously this change in consumer behavior that is required, number one, because a lot of people don't like the taste of mustard. It is costlier, so it has to become a bit cheaper. Number two, we can't allow somebody to arbitrarily hike the prices of the inputs. Like GM mustard, the company that's making it, Bayer, can't be allowed to arbitrarily increase prices for this. And other than that, what we can do is actually provide incentives to farmers to, by subsidizing the cost of procurement for them, by subsidizing the cost of input, by helping them get crop insurance. Probably the government can fund the crop insurance, etc. also, and by probably giving higher MSPs. Now, I understand this can be a highly politicized issue also, but then the idea is just to brainstorm about what else can be done to just increase the adoption of GM mustard, or
So you
of
talked
just.
about yeah, sorry to cut you, but I think you talk about changing consumer behavior. So there's a very interesting insight into this. So a lot of oil suppliers are also like very, on the edge about adopting GM mustard because they feel that this modified mustard may not have the same, the smell and the taste as original mustard oil.
Hmm,
Now that
right.
could be good also because a lot of people don't want that taste and smell, so good for them, but it's also bad for people who do buy mustard oil for that specific reason, right?
Right.
So that is something that we'll have to see how it plays
Hmm.
out if we actually do end up adopting GM mustard, that is.
Right, that was interesting. Thanks for adding that.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the question of, while this is yet to be approved by the government, guys, the whole GM mustard thing by Bayer, etc. This brings us to a more important and pertinent question: that what should be the priority? Improving crop yields to increase farmers' income, or not allowing, GM mustards seeds to penetrate and safeguard the environment while looking for alternative solutions? And while I was creating this, Garima actually told me about a very interesting alternative solution. So, Garima, why don't you just very quickly tell us about that alternative solution that is being created by a startup, and then probably we can look at ending the session.
Yeah, so a US-based startup, it's called Zero Acre Farms. It has come up with a very interesting way to create oil, right? So, you know how we make, like how alcohol is created. Basically, microbes feed on sugar and then they, excrete out basically yeast and all the other ingredients that, help with fermentation and make beer or make wine or whatever. So, these people are trying to do the same process, but like allow the microbes to excrete out oil. So it's
Hmm.
a completely like organic kind of process, and it promises like better, more healthier oil,
Right.
and
So
like
you
you
said
don't need to grow
zero acre.
crops.
You
Yeah,
called,
I think it's
this is the
called
name of
Zero
the,
Acre, but I will just
right, zero
mention the
acre
name of the
farming.
yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's the name of the company that you were mentioning. Great. Superb, guys. So I think this was it. This was the session, and we would love to understand from you in terms of, what you think should be done. Uh, is improving crop yields an option, or, the better option, or should we just do away with this solution and keep thinking about newer ways of probably adopting mustard? We are all for healthy eating, healthy options in food, but we also need to think about how do we increase the farmer's income at the end of the day. Thanks a lot, Garima. This was a great session. Thanks for being here. And guys, do like, subscribe, and share this with your friends if you found it insightful and interesting. Bye bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye, guys.